Past week. All right. He was on his bicycle. He came to an abrupt stop, and then he couldn't quite, he says he caught his toe in the pedal and he just couldn't quite stop right. But, this is just yet another example of this president being unable to function like a normal human being. And what this crash is representative of is far more than just, his inability to, speak clearly or conduct himself in a proper way that a leader should be able to do. It's representative of a lot of massive losses that the left has had this past week. Massive losses, they're losing ground in the political, social, and cultural realms, all to conservatives, Democrats, and God-fearing people. And obviously, yet another blunder on Biden doesn't look good for his administration as they're trying to deal with skyrocketing oil prices. They got no answer for that as they're trying to deal with inflation. But on the other end of things, when it comes to the government, Democrats are also losing in the House of Representatives. Republicans had a massive win in Texas's 34th congressional district. Myra Flores, this kind of outsider candidate, she came in representing the GOP, and she won in a district for the first time. GOP won for the first time there in 150 years in a special election. The incumbent had to step down. She came in with a special election, beat all the Democrats in a district where Obama got 60% of the vote. Hillary Clinton won by over 20 points. That district is 85% Hispanic. And a Republican won. And we have her campaign ad here. It's very powerful. You can see why it is exactly that she won.
Years old, my family immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico, the legal way. As a little girl, I was so proud to become an American citizen and have the opportunity to chase the American dream. At 13 years old, I was working in these very cotton fields every day, all day in the hot Texas sun. This is where I learned about hard work. From a young age, my parents instilled in me strong conservative values. They taught me to always put God and family first. They also taught me that through hard work and dedication, you can achieve anything. So I worked hard and became the first in my family to graduate from college and became a respiratory care practitioner. I am now a proud mother and a wife living the American dream in my home state of Texas. My name is Mayra Flores. As I grew up, I began to...
So Flores won 51% of the vote in that district, whereas the Democrat she was running against won 43%. That's massive. That's huge. And it disproves a lot of the kind of notions that the left and all these race essentialists have. They've been pushing this idea, both the left and kind of the people on the fringe of the alt-right, that demographics is destiny, that as long as we get enough minority voters in any one place, Democrats will sweep up, Republicans will lose, and will move into the future. Well, guess what? Most cultures of other ethnicities and races tend to be very conservative outside of America. And if you're going to bring a bunch of those people in, and if they're going to be coming here and adopt and bringing with them the values they had in their home countries, they're going to end up voting for the GOP, especially, in the post-Trump era, when we've been cutting through a lot of these ridiculous lies about the GOP being racist and so forth. So massive win for Republicans and really a sign of things to come for the red wave in November. Now, Flores will have to run again. This was a special election, so she's just filling in a seat for the incumbent who stepped down. So she'll have to run again in November. They kind of redrew the district there. It's really heavily favors Democrats. So, she could lose. She could turn around and lose this seat in just a few months. That being said, still a massive win, still a sign. The district there was flipped by like 40 points. Insanity. Just unbelievable that Republicans were able to pull that off. And it's not just in the political realm. You see Democrats losing in the House, in Senate. They're losing support like crazy. Biden is losing support. He's bleeding support because of all his failed policies and his inability to even ride a bike. But it's not just politics. That's not the only realm that Democrats are losing. Also in the culture, with the culture wars, they're losing as well. And one of the biggest stories that came out of this weekend was that of Leah Thomas being officially banned from international competition. The FINA, which is the International Swimming Federation, they instituted a ban this weekend that essentially bans transgender swimmers from competing in women's events. Now, if you look a little deeper into the story, that's not exactly what the ban does. Specifically, the new policy dictates that trans swimmers must have completed their transition by age 12 to be able to compete. So that creates some really dangerous and strange incentives there for children below the age of consent to, socially and physically transition with hormone therapies and all that stuff. But, if you actually read into the decision that the FINA made this weekend, they're not supporting early childhood transitioning. A representative for the FINA said, quote, "This is not saying that people are encouraged to transition by the age of 12. It's what the scientists are saying, that if you transition after the start of puberty, you have an advantage, which is unfair. They are not saying everyone should transition by age 11. That's ridiculous." Yes, it is, sir. "You can't transition by that age in most countries, and hopefully you won't be encouraged to." Basically, what we're saying is it's not feasible for people to have transitioned to compete without having an advantage. Now, setting aside the moral and ethical implications of encouraging these athletes, whether they support it or not, by setting the ban, by not having a total ban on trans athletes, they're setting the standard that, okay, well, if you did do your transition beforehand, you won't have any advantages, so it's okay for you to compete. Sure, there are some scientists that are saying that's the case, but definitely not all of them. There was a 2019 study from the British Medical Journal, which is basically one of the most well-known medical journals in the world, that found, quote, "Hormone therapy will not eliminate all the performance advantages of a prior male physiology." So, if Leah Thomas, the 6'1", massive, ripped dude that just so happens to be a woman now, if he had socially transitioned before the age of 12, many of the physical advantages that he has as a man would have still persisted. So this rule has not gone far enough. They need to go farther, but it's a good step in the right direction. It's a sign that people in both the kind of the local and international communities are starting to wake up to a lot of this transgender nonsense. I mean, if you just look at some of the pictures of Thomas competing against these women, he's 6'1", okay? Most of them are probably under 5'8". In fact, female Olympians, female Olympic level swimmers, the average height of them is roughly 5'9". He's 6'1", okay? And height gives you a massive advantage in swimming, bigger hands, bigger feet. In total, there's so many advantages men have, and you can't eliminate those simply through hormone therapy. And even if you do, you're basically destroying a child's body for the rest of their life and removing any chance they have of sexual development, of procreation later on. So dangerous stuff, but we're heading in the right direction. And Leah Thomas is banned from swimming internationally. That's pretty good news. Now, one other thing I think we wanted to get at with this is that Thomas, this stuff is not. We need to pressure the NCAA to make a decision as well. Because just, the international community, as it turns out, has been ahead of the U.S. on social policy related to transgenderism this entire time. You have countries like Sweden that have already banned the social transitioning of children. Other Nordic countries, European countries are beginning to admit that, hey, this may be child experimentation, this may be wrong. Turns out male physiological advantages are very obvious and clear. So, in America, we're far behind the curve here, and we're not going to start to see the damages that this has done to young women and young boys until probably a decade from now. And then when those people start suing their doctors for essentially destroying their bodies without their consent since they weren't adults, maybe then we'll see some change. But hopefully the FINA's decision can begin to put a little bit of pressure on the NCAA, and parents are going to continue to be concerned. Other competitors of Thomas at the NCAA level are going to continue to voice their concerns. He's taken away 2 national championships that should have been won by women. And people aren't going to forget that anytime soon. And look, the one bright side of this is the longer that they do that, the more people are going to wake up and the more people are going to vote Republican. And look, the wins are not, we've got wins in the House of Representatives. We got wins in terms of Biden's waning support. In kind of the cultural sphere, Leah Thomas being banned, the international community waking up to the ridiculousness of transgenderism, that's great. But sort of the last realm that the left is really beginning to lose their stranglehold on the culture is entertainment. And this past weekend, Disney has been building up this Lightyear movie for quite some time now. It's essentially a spin-off of Toy Story where they just focus on the Buzz Lightyear character, except he's not actually a toy. He's actually like the Buzz Lightyear, which is kind of a ridiculous and silly idea. And of course, they decided to recast Buzz as Chris Evans in the new film. Because obviously you can't have any conservatives playing their roles, especially guys who were on shows like Home Improvement, which actually forwarded a lot of conservative messages themselves. But anyway, the Lightyear movie, Chris Evans, a big push they wanted to make for the movie is to spread sort of a social justice agenda, sort of a new sexual revolution agenda by showing two mothers in the movie sharing a kiss. As the movie started to ramp up to production, there were a lot of controversies between when it came to kind of Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which actually never says gay in the bill. Democrats, leftists, they really wanted to make it clear, homosexuality totally needs to be the norm. Everyone needs to accept that, even if you're a Christian, even if your worldview dictates a certain version of sexual ethics. No, you need to accept this because this is the new norm. And so they decided, hey, we're going to really push for this in the new Lightyear movie. And, several producers and writers have come out and said that in subsequent interviews. And we actually have an interview with Chris Evans where he's basically explaining, what they were thinking, what they wanted to do with this sort of gay kiss scene that's in the movie. So here's that clip of Chris Evans.
Be a little frustrated that it even has to be a topic of discussion, that it is this kind of new, the goal is that we can get to a point where it is the norm and that this doesn't have to be some, uncharted waters, that eventually this is just the way it is, that representation across the board is how we make films.
They just want this to be the norm. This is what it is. This is just the norm. This is just what it's going to be. Everyone just needs to accept that this is how the world works. And if you don't, Chris Evans came out in a separate interview and said, anyone who disagrees with this is a dinosaur and a bigot. But this is all part of Disney's campaign. They've pushed this into several of their kids' movies where they want kids to be exposed to, different kinds of sexual orientations, different kinds of sexual conduct, transgenderism. And even, there was whatever the Red Panda movie was, I think Turning Red was the name of it on Disney Plus. You had a scene where the main character, who's a girl, is actually twerking at her mom, like shaking her butt and like, twerking at her mom, which, disgusting in and of itself, but speaks to this larger narrative where they're trying to push kids in this left-wing sexual agenda, this LGBTQ agenda, and they can't accept the fact that there are certain people out here, there are certain people with different opinions and different worldviews that don't accept their view of sexuality. If you're a Christian in this country, it's going to get increasingly difficult for you to exist, because not only is the left doing this, you have the right doing this as well. You have the GOP is totally full in support of gay marriage, of admitting, gay marriage is just like normal marriage, which is obviously a lie. What makes marriage is that it's a covenant between a man, a woman, and God. Can't really do that with two dudes. Really can't do that with two women either. Any more than you could do it with a dude and an animal or just one dude by himself. But your worldview is not the dominant worldview anymore. Christianity used to be what defined this nation. All of these values, the traditional understanding of men and women, that's been destroyed. You see that with Leah Thomas. The values of self-governance, of not having a massive government, that's getting devastated by Joe Biden and Democrats. All of these cracks have been forming in our day-to-day lives, and they're beginning to show, and people are beginning to push back. So, you got a little bit of hope here because Lightyear absolutely bombed. I think it was projected to make anywhere from $70 to $85 million in its opening weekend. It only netted $50 million. That's a major loss for them. They probably need a lot more money to make up the cost of actually making the film. And it just shows people aren't going to keep consuming. They've counted on you. Everyone at Disney, everyone in Hollywood, they know that they're pushing an agenda. And they also know that they can count on most conservative people to watch their content regardless of whether the content itself is saying that their worldview is totally corrupt and evil. So, we continue to as long as we continue to consume these products, they're going to continue making them. And it looks like people are starting to stop, and that's great. And actually, another really promising sign that we have a story coming out later today on is two of the top at-home streaming movies from the past month have both been made by the conservative film studio run by Daily Wire. There's the What is a Woman documentary, which really, it addresses the Leah Thomas question. It addresses transgenderism in general. That movie has been buzzing like crazy. Then, Gina Carano has officially been uncanceled after Disney fired her. Daily Wire decided to make a movie with her, a Western, and that movie is doing really well as well. So people are turning away from woke, ideology, from woke propaganda like Lightyear, and they're turning towards conservative-made entertainment. And, if we continue to move in that direction, if we begin to refuse to give these people, don't give your money to people that hate you. That's a general good rule of thumb. So, in summary, lots of losses for the left this past week. It looks like we're really set to win big coming up in November. This isn't just going to be a red wave. It's going to be a red tsunami. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of wjlive. If you want to support us, make sure to follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/wjlive. Follow, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do everything you can to help us out there. And if you really want to help us out, in addition to following us on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff, all that great stuff, if you really want to help us out, please subscribe to the Western Journal at westernjournal.com/join. What that does, when you become a subscriber, you become part of the movement. You're someone that is funding directly conservative Christian-led journalism and reporting. Every single outlet, every single source has their own bias and their own worldview that they're operating out of. Our worldview and our bias is that of the truth of the Bible, of Jesus Christ, and of conservatism and free markets. So if you want to support that, if you want to join the movement, please subscribe to the Western Journal at westernjournal.com/join. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again on Wednesday.